Hello, and welcome to A More Perfect Podcast. The Democratic Party, after losing the House, the Senate, and the presidency, are going through an identity crisis. In many ways, it feels like they have lost the ability to talk to the working class. Heck, I'd argue they've lost the ability to talk to each other too. And what's crazy to me is progressives in this country have just been wanting leadership, people that think, at least in general like we do, to be loud about what is wrong with this world and what they want to do. We want a voice again. Now, there have been some people that have been trying to get out and become that voice. You've had Bernie Sanders and AOC going around the country speaking. You even had Tim Walz going around and speaking. But another person who's been making a lot of headlines on the Democratic side of the country has been Gavin Newsom. And just recently, he was on Bill Mahr's show. And hooey, it was an example to me of how the Democratic Party is out of touch, is not listening to the people that want to support the more progressive, the more humanity side of this country. So I'm going to play a few clips from that, and we're going to talk about the issues that I'm seeing.
John Fetterman was in the news today. He said, if you're talking about the Democratic Party, he said, if we don't get our shit together, we're going to be a permanent minority.
I agree.
And I see you're doing something about it. I applaud it. I think it's great. You've got this podcast. You're talking to people. You know, it's amazing to me that even that is controversial to some people. They call it platforming. If you talk to someone you don't agree with.
Talking isn't platforming. And in a second, I'm going to continue with Gavin Newsom's response. But I just want to be clear. We should be talking to people that we disagree with.
I feel like this country is divided into owners and healers. People who think you can own the other side. Yeah, well, Gavin Newsom owned DeSantis. Yeah. DeSantis destroyed Gavin Newsom. Yeah. Or people who want to talk and heal. And I feel like the next president is going to be, at least if it comes from this party, the Democratic Party, someone who wants to talk and heal. And I feel like we're doing that.
It's really been interesting, the reaction to the podcast. I mean, we had some controversial figures on, I'll acknowledge that, and Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, and some others. But you're right. I mean, this idea that we can't even have a conversation with the other side.
You have to. They won.
Thank you. That's it. Bottom line.
The problem, Gavin, is not that you talked to Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. The problem is when you had Charlie Kirk on, what you said was affirming Charlie Kirk's transphobic views on trans women, trans men in sports. Do you get that? It has nothing to do with the fact that you talked to Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. Now, I'm sure there are some people that disliked it, but as a whole, yeah, we need to have people in leadership in the Democratic Party, progressives, speak with those that we severely disagree with. That is necessary in this. Not everyone can do it, and you have the capability of doing it. So it's not that you talk to them. It's that you agreed with them on some of the worst ideals that people on the far right have.
And by the way, the notion we just have to continue to talk to ourselves or we're in the same damn echo chamber. These guys are crushing us. The Democratic brand is toxic right now. We had a high water mark 2 weeks ago, and that was a CNN poll at 29% favorability. It's dropped in the NBC poll down to 27%. It's one thing to make noise, but you also have to make sense.
Correct. There are some severe issues in the Democratic Party, and a lot of it stems from lack of leadership in the Democratic Party. And people like Chuck Schumer didn't help anything when they caved to this continuing resolution. It's really interesting to me if you watch everything that Gavin Newsom is doing, because Gavin Newsom is trying to separate himself from the leadership in the Democratic Party. I hate to tell you, Gavin, but you are part of the Democratic leadership in this country. You've made that very clear for the last however long you've been, governor especially. We've known that you wanted to run for president for a while, and you are a leader in the Democratic Party. Trying to separate yourself doesn't help anything here. But to speak to your 29% favorability, this is an interesting idea that is going through a lot of circles. There's often this idea that you are either one or the other. So you either support the Democrats or you support the Republicans. So when he says 29%, that That's bad. That obviously is bad. I acknowledge that. But to assume that the percentages of people that support normally the Democratic Party are just going to support the Republican Party now because of it is misguided. That's the problem. A lot of us, me included, who, if I was part of this poll, would say that I have a low favorability rating of the Democratic Party. I don't support the Republican Party at all. And that is the overarching problem, is you're not actually listening to the constituents that would support you. Most of the people that want Democrats to succeed, that want progressives to succeed in this country, are looking for people that actually are listening to them. And what we see is people like Gavin Newsom, like Chuck Schumer, listening to those that would lean closer to the current Republican Party. Now, again, I don't support the Republican Party at all. I will never vote for the current Republican Party. But to say that somehow that means that I would naturally be favorable to the Democratic Party as it currently is running? No. Also, no. That is the overarching issue. I believe that a lot of Democrats, like Gavin Newsom, think that they can just get our vote because of how bad the Republican Party is. That was the issue in the 2024 election, right? There was this idea that because Donald Trump was so bad that we would just magically vote for Kamala Harris. Now, I voted for Kamala Harris, but not everyone thinks like I do, saw the world, saw the situation the way I did. There are a lot of people that are progressive, that want to support human rights, that want to support the idea of equal pay or having everyone in this country get enough money to pay all of our bills, cost of living pay. But they didn't feel listened to. The reason Donald Trump won is because the people that voted for him felt listened to. Anyways, he says more, so we're gonna keep watching.
With this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground and not take cheap shots. I'm not looking to put a spoke in the wheel of their, or at least a crowbar in the spokes of their wheel to trip them up, to your point. And I think it's important. Democrats, we tend to be a little more judgmental than we should be. This notion of cancel culture, you've been living it. You've been on the receiving end of it for years and years and years. That's real. And Democrats need to own up to that. They've got to mature about this.
So I agree the overarching issue of cancel culture is out there. I don't agree with the level that many progressives, especially on the far left, take cancel culture. But in the same respect, I have no authority to tell anyone who they should or shouldn't support. If they disagree with someone, they have every right to not support them. We do need to learn to talk to people that we disagree with. My issue with Gavin Newsom and the current Democratic leadership is that they are trying to find areas that we can come to agreement with people that voted for Donald Trump. Now, to some extent, we do need to do that, but we also need to learn to communicate with people who would not vote for Donald Trump, who also would not vote for the current Democratic Party. 90 million-ish people did not vote in the 2024 election. Now, a good chunk of that probably just has never voted or would never consider voting because they don't feel like they know enough. But a large portion of people that didn't vote or voted for a third party did that because they felt that the current leadership in the Democratic Party doesn't understand them, isn't listening. Now, do both sides need to learn to agree to disagree to some extent? Do we need to find fundamentals that we can agree on and then learn to work on those other things, learn to communicate, learn to dialogue well? Yes. But the way Governor Newsom is going about it is by trying to pander to people in the center, the ones that go back and forth, that don't really pay much attention to what's going on in the world past their own situation. And don't get me wrong, I understand that. We live in a country right now, in a society right now, where millions upon millions upon millions of us are just barely surviving, which is why the Democratic Party needs to learn to speak to all Americans, whether you're in the center or whether you're farther on the left. The Democratic leadership's issue, the people running the Democratic Party right now, the problem is not that we aren't talking to the center. The problem is you aren't talking to the left. Many of us, even I who voted for Kamala Harris. C is a group of people, a leadership that are completely ignoring a whole section of progressives in this country and trying to get the hands, the votes of people that will jump back and forth because they don't really care about voting on humanity. They don't really care about voting on morality. They care about what affects them. They care about what they believe and nothing else. That's why you keep hearing people say, oh, well, I don't care about, the LGBTQ issue. What I care about is the fact that things are too expensive. And that's why I voted for Trump. Well, those two things are integral to each other. You can't only vote for one without supporting the other. And that is the overarching issue. And when you had Charlie Kirk on, Governor Newsom, and you justified his transphobia, you soured yourself to millions of Americans, including myself. Not that I was a massive supporter of yours, but compared to other people, I felt that we could at least agree on the fundamentals. And what I saw there is that we didn't. And that is the problem. That is the problem with Democratic leadership right now. If you want to win again, if you want to have a place in society with all of these other Americans that are starting to pay attention to politics more than they ever have because of everything that's going on right now, then you need to open your ears to those people, not just pandering to the ones that will flip-flop when anything happens that they don't like. Thank you for watching a More Perfect podcast. Please like, subscribe, follow me on my Substack too, as I will be making consistent posts there as well.